Let me ask you a question. When I ask you to say the first thing that comes to your mind when talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, what would it be? Now, there are a lot of answers. The stance, the overtop action, the creative use of abilities in the series, the villains, the heroes, the... memes. Now, all of these are correct, but the one answer that I want to talk about is the art style. JoJo's has a very distinct art style that you can recognize immediately, especially when other media references it. It is, in my opinion, the most recognizable part of JoJo's and its biggest identity. You could probably say that for a lot of series, like for example, My Hero Academia, Sailor Moon, Gachiakuta, Chainsaw Man. Thank you, This is a pretty basic rule in general. Like, of course you don't want to make something that looks generic. You gotta have something that makes that IP feel like it's theirs and not like something else. This also applies with video games. Let's take a look at Cuphead and Hollow Knight, for example. Both are 2D platformers with challenging bosses, but they look incredibly different. And if we compare Hollow Knight with Lotus Knight, then yeah, it kinda just looks like another Hollow Knight game. Alright, now let's talk about Blue Archive. Blue Archive's art style has evolved from the game's closed beta test all the way to the modern day. It's mostly rooted in the fact that Blue Archive's development team grew larger. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. That's how it usually goes for every game development, you stupid fuck. Let me finish. What I'm trying to say is that Blue Archive's art style started as more complex and not uniform. Back then, Nexon had a lot of artists that have their own distinct art style. But over time, they evolved and developed a style that just screams Blue Archive. The illustrators that were responsible for the early sprite works are, to name a few, Doremi, Hwansung, 9ML, and MX2J. Three of those, being Doremi, Hwansung, and MX2J, are considered to be the ones that laid the foundations that current Blue Archive style is built on. These three are also responsible for a majority of the NPC sprites that you see in the game. For starters, let's take MX2J as an example. MX2J is an illustrator who has worked on the most early sprites of Blue Archive, having worked on the sprite for Iori, Chinatsu, and Hasumi. If we take a look at these early illustrations, you can tell it's a lot more detailed than, let's say, the After School Sweets Club's band sprites, since they're also drawn by MX2J. At first glance, you can tell that the biggest difference that's noticeable is the rendering style. Iori, Chinatsu, and Hasumi are rendered intricately. The hair of the girls and Hasumi's wings have a lot of treatment, which is a fancy way of saying it looks more real and has more detail than usual. That's the best that I could explain it. Another thing you can see are the legs, which are, again, rendered in detail. Now, if you were to compare those with the After School Sweets Club's band sprites, you can notice the difference immediately. The hair is rendered very simple, and the legs are less refined. Blue Archive, at this moment in time, has transitioned from detailed rendering with lots of treatment to cel-shaded rendering. It is basically a style of rendering that aims to give detail to an art piece minimalistically. It allows illustrations to be done more easily and efficiently. The term cel-shaded came from the early animation era where animators started using celluloid to make their animation. Celluloids are transparent pieces of plastic that's layered on top of a frame that has already been drawn on paper. It is later traced and colored on a piece of celluloid, allowing animation frames to be layered on top of each other without having to redraw the backgrounds over and over again. Cel shading came from this era as giving detail to every frame is very inefficient, so only using very simple colors for lighting and shadows helps with that. This would later then be used in most modern anime today. Like, take a look at any anime that's airing right now, you'll see that it's mostly or primarily cel shaded. And it's also a no-brainer that Blue Archive is heavily anime coded, like, no shit. So seeing them transition to this stage is not really a surprise. You can see it from the example I gave above, being the After School Sweets Club's band alts. Now, another way to show Blue Archive's transition to cel-shaded rendering is, again, from MX2J's Hasumi illustration. Both her regular sprite and track sprite. You can see the differences that I talked about. The wings and hair are way more simplified than her base sprite. The hair especially are way more simplified for longer haired characters, which now kind of blends together into one single color and having little to no lines separating the strands of hair, although this isn't something that's constant. Another difference that's also noticeable are the colors. This can be seen through Yoshimi's regular and band sprites. Her hair and skin on her band sprite looks less saturated compared to her base sprite, and more of these can be seen with, well, most modern sprites that you can see today. Another thing that can be brought up is the way clothing is rendered in the old and modern Blue Archive. Taking a look at how MX2J drew both Neru and Guide Tsubaki, the clothing folds are way more detailed on Neru's compared to Tsubaki's. You can even take a look at Terasaori, who he also illustrated, also has very simplified clothing folds on her dress. Clothes are rendered very simple now, but what do I actually mean by simple? what makes an illustration quote-unquote feel simple? Well, there's one thing that we can take a look at, and they're called value groups. In short, you're simplifying the range of values that are visible in a single illustration, prioritizing readability and recognizability over the minute details. Let's take a look at Neru's two alts, for example. If we make these monochrome and add a posterization effect, which basically just simplify the colors a bit, you can see that school Neru's values are way more simplified than if you were to compare it to Neru's base sprite, whose values are way more all over the place and not group tighter, making it look more complex. Now, I've given examples with MX2J's art, but let's take a look at the other illustrators that have also transitioned to the new cel-shaded rendering that Blue Archive has adopted. And a better way to see this is by comparing how different characters look like from their early/original sprites to the more modern sprites. To name a few, Neru, who's drawn by MX2J and Nemoga, Hibiki, both drawn by Mimitoka, Omoi and Midori, both drawn by Kiki and Kokosando, Juri, drawn by Nino and Ku3473, Utaha, drawn by Yamakawa and Paruru, and finally we have Mine, drawn by Neo2 and Diddle Diddle. Oh god, is that how you pronounce that name? Funnily enough, out of every artist that has drawn for Blue Archive, Doremi's art style is the most consistent one since the very early days of the game. I'm guessing that his art style is the model of the game's art direction, especially with the game's CGs, as Doremi drew a majority of them alongside Hwansung. Basically, his art is the genesis of the game's current art style. We'll get into this more later on. Speaking about the sprite changes, we can take a look at Blue Archive's Live 2Ds. While it has been mostly consistent, don't get me wrong, some look more unique and have clearly been rendered differently from their original character designs. Let's take Hasmi's normal Life 2D and I don't think I can show that, so let's just go with her track alt. Hasmi's normal Life 2D is rendered a lot more differently than her track alt. The illustration is treated differently, and her wings and hair are very dramatically lit, although this is more of a design choice. Something similar can be said for Akane. Her normal Life 2D feels very different. It feels very realistic. Everything about her Life 2D is more rendered. It has a lot more detail than the usual. The whole vibe of her Life 2D feels very vivid, which is very unconventional for Blue Archive Life 2Ds, even from back then. Comparing that to her school alt, where again, the details are simpler. Hanako and Airi are a different case, as their whole character design, as in their face and hair volume, looks completely different. This is due to the fact that they are drawn by different people, with Airi and Hanako both being drawn by MX2J. Now that I've talked about the differences in art style from both old and new Blue Archive, let's talk about the reasoning for the change. What? Look to my right. Okay. There's no fucking thing on my right. What kind of fucking ARG bullshit is? Ah! While taking a look at Blue Archive's old sprites, let's take a look at their beta art. You might have seen this beta Mario design floating around the Blue Archive sphere from time to time. Now, the current Mario we have today is drawn by Doremi, but the original artist behind her goes by the name of Vinokar. The same goes for Kirara, whose original beta design was drawn by an artist that goes by Hino Hinako. Kirara would later then be drawn by MX2J. And another one is Kazusa, whose original artist was Mimosa. She was then drawn by MX2J. Jesus Christ, how many times do I have to say these guys' names? What this shows is that these artists are able to design a character that's approved by the art director, but it doesn't really fit in the style that the game is going for, so they're redrawn by one of the main illustrators. While on this topic, this is probably how the workflow is like inside the development team. This is different compared to other gacha games like, for example, FGO, which has varying art styles for each character drawn. So with that being said, what's up with the change? Why did Blue Archive's art style change from being detailed to something more simpler and softer? Well, this is where Doremi plays a major role in establishing Blue Archive's art style. As stated before, Doremi is the genesis of Blue Archive's modern art style, which makes sense when you look at his role as the character art director. Him and Hwansung are responsible for the majority of the PVs, from the very first PV all the way to PV 4.5, where they're both credited as storyboard artists, and Doremi specifically being in charge as the character art director. This is the reason why Blue Archive CGs have always been consistent since the very start of the game. Doremi's style is the basis of what the game's art style eventually came to be, and it is one of his goals ever since the early days of Blue Archive. As stated in the Blue Archive Artwork 2 staff interview,
since joining the team, I have worked as the lead illustrator on character designs, the first promotional video, and the memorial lobby, among other projects, striving to establish a distinctive art style for Blue Archive. Currently, as the lead artist, I am responsible for creating the signature illustrations for Blue Archive.
And Well, he succeeded. Blue Archive has a very distinct art style that can now be seen as one of its biggest identities. But I guess that does leave us with a question. When exactly did it start to actually take into effect? In the same interview, Hwansung did mention that
If our goal leading up to our first anniversary was stabilization, then our goal leading up to our second anniversary was growth and evolvement.
the way that I interpret this is that the first year of Blue Archive is made to stabilize the foundations first. But then, in the second year, they start to improve on everything in Blue Archive. And considering that Hwansung is the one that's saying this, who is the art director at the time, I'm assuming the art direction is the primary thing that was being talked here. And if you look at the banner release dates, the art style started to change to be more consistent around the time frame that Hwansung mentioned, with Shun's Lolly Alt, Hatsune Miku, and New Year Serika being one of the first few instances of the new art style being used before the first anniversary. After the first anniversary, Kozeki Ui, Rabbit Squad, and most notably, the Cheerleading Engineering Club have also undergone the new modern style for Blue Archive. After the cheerleading alts, the new art style has slowly started gaining momentum, and eventually the art style became the norm at around late 2023, just before Blue Archive's 3rd anniversary. Well, guess that's it. Starting from 2023 onwards, Blue Archive has found the art style that they're known for. Around a year later, most of the Blue Archive art team did leave the game to work on other projects. After they left, there was some controversy about the art MXDJ made for the game. This is regarding Marina Chipao and the After School Youth Club's band sprites. Where Marina's sprite looks half-assed, Yoshimi didn't have the proper proportions as her original, Kazusa and Airi looked flatter than they should be, and Natsu... There's nothing wrong with Natsu, she's just fucking stupid. A lot of the fanbase felt that MX2J sabotaged Blue Archive's art, since MX2J and Dormy are revealed to be part of a new project titled Project KV, which I'm not gonna get into since that's a whole nother can of worms that I do not want to crack open. Well, at least for now. Besides that, I do remember there was a statement where MX2J had been training new artists to work on Blue Archive, although I couldn't exactly find a statement regarding this. And looking at the new faces that have worked for Blue Archive now, then yeah, I think MX2J did a pretty damn good job. And with that concludes the evolution of Blue Archive's art style. Personally, I love how it went from a very rough and detailed render to more of a softer and simpler render style. It makes the characters feel very appealing and unique. Hell, why stop now? Blue Archive allows everyone to draw their characters somewhat easily due to how simple they are. I don't fully know what's up with the Project KV situation and what the art team's relationship are with the higher-ups in Nexon or something. Since reading the Blue Archive's Artworks 2 staff interview with Hwansung, Isaku-san, Lim Jong-gyu, and Doremi, they expressed how much they look forward to seeing the fans see their work in the future. And not even a year later since the book was released, 3 of the members in the staff interview, that I know of at least, left the team. It's kind of sad seeing how much love they have for the game and not being able to show that love and creativity. When I first learned about them leaving the team 2 years ago, I didn't truly realize what we lost until I started writing this video. Although even after all of the drama, I do still want to give my thanks and gratitude to everyone who has contributed to Blue Archive's art and visuals. They have truly made something incredibly special that will be remembered very fondly, and have inspired people to actually pick up the pencil and start drawing, myself included. And I think that's pretty cool. I hope to see more of their work on Dynamis 1's new project, Astray Horatio, soon in the future. Oh, fuck! I forgot about Nagi-san, the literal one person with an old and new sprite. What did you say? Look behind me, like, not this again. There's nothing here. What are you on about?